A British prisoner of war escaped a Nazi camp 200 times, not to run away, but to run to someone. May 1940, Nazi-occupied Poland. The wire cutters felt cold in Horace Greasley's hands as he crouched in the shadows of Stalag XX-A. Above him, the searchlights swept back and forth, lazy arcs of light looking for one thing, an escaping prisoner of war. Attempt 47, maybe 48, he had lost count. But not her face. Rosa's face waiting for him somewhere out there in the dark. 3 miles away, 3 miles of fear, risk and longing. He was about to slip through barbed wire, not to reach England, not to gain his freedom, but to reach the woman who had become his entire world. Behind him, 10,000 Allied prisoners slept in their barracks, resigned to wait out the war. Ahead of him lay a path that would make him the most extraordinary escape artist in history, not because he stayed free, but because he always came back. This is the story of Horace Greasley, the British prisoner who escaped a Nazi camp 200 times for love. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. We tell stories like this all the time. Now back to the story. The story begins months earlier. When Britain declared war on Germany, Horace Greasley was 19. He was a hairdresser's apprentice from Leicestershire, more interested in chasing girls than chasing fascists. When his call-up papers arrived, he reported to the Leicestershire Regiment, convinced, like so many, that the war would be over by Christmas. He could not have been more wrong. The German blitzkrieg smashed through France in the spring of 1940. Horace and his comrades fought bravely, but the pace of the attack was overwhelming. They retreated, hoping to reach Dunkirk and escape back to England. He almost made it. Just 20 miles from the beaches, exhausted and separated from his unit, Horace was captured by German soldiers who looked almost as weary as he did. One of them muttered, "Für Sie ist der Krieg vorbei." For you, the war is over. But Horace's war was only beginning. The trucks carried him deeper into occupied territory, past burning villages and endless lines of refugees. He was now a prisoner of war, with no idea if he would ever see home again. His destination was Stalag XX-A, a grim sprawl of barbed wire, guard towers and wooden barracks in the Polish countryside. It housed over 10,000 Allied prisoners. Conditions were harsh. The barracks leaked in winter and baked in summer. Food was little more than watery soup, black bread, and the occasional scrap of meat. Men wasted away from disease and despair, but Horace had a stubborn resilience. He'd grown up in working-class Leicester, knew what it meant to live lean, and refused to give up. He made friends, picked up bits of German from the guards, and adjusted to the grinding monotony of captivity. What he did not expect was that love would find him there. In 1942, the German war machine had a problem. Millions of men were away at the front, and the Reich needed labor to keep running. Their solution was simple: use prisoners of war. Under the Geneva Convention, enlisted men could be compelled to work. So Horace was sent out on a daily work detail to a quarry near a small German village. For most prisoners, it was just another form of captivity, hard labor under watchful eyes. For Horace, it became the beginning of something miraculous. Because at that quarry, he met Rosa. She was 18, with dark hair and eyes that carried both intelligence and sadness. Rosa worked as a translator for the German administration, helping communicate with the various foreign workers and prisoners. The first time Horace heard her careful English, thick with accent but clear in meaning, he was transfixed. She was explaining safety instructions for the stone crushers. Most prisoners listened blankly, eager to get it over with. But Horace lingered. He asked questions. He pretended to need clarification. Anything to keep her talking. She looked at him in surprise. Few prisoners spoke at all, and almost none engaged with a German official. But there was something in his gaze, a spark of curiosity, even warmth. She explained the machinery, but Horace was studying her face. He asked how she spoke such good English. She admitted she had studied languages at university before the war, hoping to travel, to teach, to see the world. Now she translated at a quarry. In that instant, two young people recognized each other. Their dreams had been derailed by the same war, their futures stolen, and in that shared recognition something ignited. Horace introduced himself. She hesitated, aware of the risk, then extended her hand quickly. "Rosa," she said. It was the most dangerous handshake in Europe, and the beginning of everything. Fraternization was forbidden. For her, prison, maybe execution. For him, solitary confinement, or worse. Yet from that handshake grew the most extraordinary romance of the war. At first they spoke briefly, in snatched conversations while she translated instructions. Then slowly more. Horace pretended to need translation help. Rosa lingered a little longer when she knew he would be there. They talked about books, music, family. She told him her father had been killed on the Russian front, her brother missing in North Africa. He told her about Lester, his family's small barbershop, his love of travel. They discovered common dreams and growing affection. Each meeting carried danger, but also life. In a world designed to strip men of humanity, Horace found his humanity returning in Rosa's presence. Then came the news that nearly destroyed him. Rosa told him she was being transferred. She would soon be working 3 kilometers away, in a village called Freiwaldau, assigned to agricultural administration. 3 kilometers is nothing to most men. To Horace, trapped behind wire, it was an ocean. That night, lying in his bunk, he made a decision that would define his war. If Rosa was only 3 kilometers away, he would find a way to reach her. And he would not do it once, but as many times as it took. Other prisoners attempted escapes. Some were caught, some shot. A few lasted days or weeks before being dragged back. No one had ever attempted what Horace now planned. Systematic escapes, not to stay free, but to spend a few hours with the woman he loved. In November 1942, the first attempt began. Horace had studied the guard routines, memorized the timing of patrols, watched for blind spots in the searchlights. He had stolen wire cutters from the quarry and hidden them. At 2 in the morning, when the guards were at their sleepiest, he slipped out of the barracks, crawled across the compound, and reached the wire. The cutters whispered through metal. Suddenly he was outside. The 3-kilometer trek was perilous. Fields, woods, checkpoints. Every shadow could hide danger, but love gave him courage training never had. He reached Rosa's cottage at dawn, tapped lightly on her window. She opened it, terrified. "Are you insane?" she whispered. "If they catch you, do you know what they will do to us?" Horace only took her hands. "I had to see you." For 2 hours they talked in her kitchen, voices low, hearts full. When he left, slipping back through the fence just before roll call, he was exhilarated. He had done the impossible. The first of 200, escapes not away from captivity, but toward love. From that night on, Horace's life became a rhythm of captivity and freedom. By day a prisoner, by night a lover on the run. He cut the wire, crossed the fields, tapped on the cottage window, and returned before dawn. Again and again. Each journey was a miracle of precision. Each return a defiance of Nazi control. He became a master of escape routes, varying them constantly. Sometimes he left earlier in the evening, sometimes after midnight. He cached tools and supplies along the way. He learned how to blend with shadows, how to read the patterns of searchlights, how to listen for patrols before they were close. For Rosa, every night was a gamble. She risked harboring him, giving him food, sharing her home with an enemy prisoner. Discovery would mean ruin. Yet love gave her courage too. Together they built a secret world, fragile but real. They talked of dreams, what life might be like if the war ended, where they might go, how they might live. They joked quietly, invented small private names for each other. Horace called her his German Rose. She called him mein verrückter Engländer, my crazy Englishman. And each dawn, he returned to his barracks, counted in with the rest, heart racing but alive. The escapes became not just visits to Rosa, but statements of defiance. In a camp meant to crush spirit, Horace's repeated vanishing proved the Germans had not beaten him. Every time he crawled under the wire and returned unbroken, he reclaimed his humanity. Other prisoners noticed. Some thought him reckless, others admired him. But only Horace knew the truth, that it wasn't freedom he wanted. It was Rosa. Every escape was a journey not away from captivity, but toward love. By 1943, he had escaped dozens of times. The numbers blurred, but the pattern held. Danger grew sharper with each attempt. He knew that eventually, the Germans would notice something, but he could not stop. For Horace, every day without Rosa was unendurable. Every hour with her was worth a lifetime of risk. By 1944, Horace Greasley had escaped so many times that even he lost count. What had begun as reckless passion had settled into a routine so audacious it almost seemed ordinary. Crawl under the wire, walk 3 miles through darkness, tap softly on the window, sit at the kitchen table with Rosa until dawn, return before the roll call bell, repeat. 1 night out of 5, 50 nights a year, year after year, 200 times in total. No prisoner in history had ever done anything like it. Yet Horace made it look effortless, until the close calls reminded him how fragile the whole game really was. One such night in March 1944 nearly ended it all. The fog was thick, muffling sound and sight. Horace was returning late, his farewell to Rosa delayed by their talk of Allied advances in Italy and Soviet victories in the East. He slipped along the road, heart pounding, when voices cut through the mist. German soldiers on patrol. He dropped into a ditch, pressing himself against the frozen earth. Boots crunched just feet above him. A cigarette ember glowed, drifting smoke into the fog. Haben Sie etwas gesehen? One asked. Nichts. Alles ruhig, came the reply. Nothing. All quiet. But they lingered. 20 minutes felt like 20 years. Horace lay still, praying no one decided to relieve himself in the ditch. Finally, they moved on. Horace waited another 10 minutes before crawling out, drenched, shivering, but alive. He slipped back into camp seconds before dawn, exhausted and filthy. At roll call, he stood like the others, but inside he wondered, how many more times could he dance with death before it finally caught him? Another danger arrived in human form. Obergefreiter Klaus Müller, a new guard commander, a veteran of the Russian front, notorious for his discipline and ruthlessness. He had lost 2 brothers in the war and had no sympathy for Allied prisoners. Under his watch, everything changed. More head counts, random searches, brighter floodlights, surprise midnight inspections. The first time Müller's men checked Horace's barracks at night, Horace was with Rosa. His absence would have been noticed, except that his friend, RAF Sergeant Tommy Morrison, had guessed the truth weeks earlier. When the guards entered, Tommy had quickly shaped a dummy in Horace's bunk out of pillows and spare clothing. In the dim light, it was enough. Horace slipped back before dawn to find Tommy waiting, arms crossed. You'll get us all shot, you mad bastard. Horace only smiled. Maybe, but it will be worth it. Tommy shook his head, but from then on, he quietly covered for his friend whenever inspections came too close. Müller turned up the lights. Horace turned up the risk. He varied his escape times, sometimes leaving in the early evening and returning late, sometimes waiting until after midnight. He developed multiple routes, cached supplies along the way, and recruited discreet allies among the prisoners. But nothing could change the core fact: he could not stop. Every hour without Rosa felt like suffocation. Every successful visit kept him alive. For Rosa, the risks were just as high. Every night she harbored an enemy prisoner. If caught, she could be sent to prison or a concentration camp, branded a traitor to her country. Food was scarce, yet she shared what little she had. She grew thin, often giving Horace her portion. You need your strength, she insisted, pushing bread toward him. If you collapse halfway back, what good will I be then? He argued, but she never yielded. For Rosa, love required sacrifice, and so did survival. Their time together became more intense as the war turned. By 1944, the Germans were on the defensive. News filtered through. Allies pushing in Italy, Soviets advancing in the east, D-Day landing in France. At night in the cottage, Rosa and Horace clung to hope, but that hope carried fear. What would happen when the war ended? Would Horace be repatriated instantly, torn from her forever? Would she be punished for her relationship with a prisoner? Could they ever have a life together? Sometimes I think we're mad, Rosa whispered, eyes full of worry. Even if we survive, how can it work? You're British, I'm German. Your people will see me as the enemy. Mine will call me a traitor. Horace held her hands steady. I don't know. I don't know how it ends. I only know that right now, in this moment, I love you. And I'll escape every night of this war if that's what it takes. Rosa's tears glistened in the candlelight. Mein verrückter Engländer, she whispered. My crazy Englishman. By early 1945, Germany was collapsing. The Allies were across the Rhine. The Soviets were racing toward Berlin. Everyone in the camp knew the end was coming. But for Horace and Rosa, the approaching victory brought dread. What if it separated them forever? Rosa was visibly weakening. Food shortages in Germany had become desperate. She insisted Horace eat, even as her own body grew frail. You need it more, she said firmly. For the escapes, he hated it. He wanted to keep her safe, to protect her. But all he could offer was presence. Nights together in a cottage lit by hope and fear. And then suddenly it was over. April 1945. One morning, Horace woke to the sound of strange engines. Tanks approaching. Not German. Soviet T-34s, flying red flags, rolled into Stalag XX-A. Liberation had come. The prisoners cheered, tears streaming, embraces everywhere. After years of captivity, they were free. But for Horace, liberation brought only panic. He would be sent home. Rosa would be left behind, exposed to suspicion, maybe worse. He had to see her, one more time. So for the last time, Horace escaped. Not from Nazis now, but from Soviet processing officers trying to organize Western prisoners. He slipped away, using the same cunning that had carried him to Rosa 200 times before. When he reached Freiwaldau, his heart sank. The cottage was empty. The villagers had fled west, terrified of Soviet retribution. Rosa was gone. On the kitchen table where they had shared so many quiet nights, He found a message carved into the wood. Wait for me in Leicester. I will find you. Ich liebe dich. I love you. Horace stood in silence, reading the words again and again. After everything, after 200 escapes, the war had ended not with reunion, but with absence. He returned to the camp devastated. 3 weeks later, he was repatriated to Britain, processed through debriefings, and discharged. Family and neighbours welcomed him home. They wanted stories of life in the camp. He told them about work details, conditions, friendships. He never spoke of Rosa. Some things were too precious to explain to those who could not understand. Post-war Britain was no paradise. Cities lay in ruins. Rationing continued. For returning POWs, reintegration was difficult. Horace returned to his family's barbershop, cutting hair, sweeping floors. On the outside he was free. On the inside he was still captive. To memory, to longing, to the hope that someday Rosa would appear. Every knock on the door made his heart race. Every letter from abroad was opened with trembling hands. Every dark-haired woman in the street made him turn. His family urged him to move on. "You're 26, Horace," his mother said in 1947. "You can't wait forever. Find a nice girl, settle down." But how could he? He had already found the girl. Everyone else was only a shadow. And then, one morning, 2 years after the war, a miracle arrived. A letter from Germany. His mother handed it to him, eyes puzzled. The handwriting unmistakable. He tore it open. "My dearest Horace," it began. "If you receive this, then miracles are still possible." Rosa was alive in Munich, working as a translator for the American military government. She had been searching for him for 2 years, through Red Cross offices, through military channels, even newspaper ads. Now finally she had found him. "I think of you every day," she wrote. "I dream of our nights together. If you still love me, if what we had was real, please come to Munich. I will wait for you at the Hauptbahnhof every Sunday at noon until you arrive. I will wait forever." Horace read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling. Rosa was alive. Rosa still loved him. She was waiting. The obstacles were immense. Travel to Germany in 1947 was difficult, expensive, restricted. He needed permits, papers, funds. His family thought him insane. His father argued fiercely. "She's German, Horace. They bombed our cities. They killed your friends. How can you love one of them?" Horace's reply was simple. "She's not one of them. She's Rosa." Nothing else mattered. He sold his share of the shop. He fought through bureaucracy. He endured suspicion. And in May 1948, he boarded a train bound for Munich, every mile bringing him closer to joy or heartbreak. On Sunday morning, the train pulled into Munich Hauptbahnhof. Horace stood in the crowd, eyes scanning, heart pounding. Noon approached. No sign of her. Minutes dragged. Doubt gnawed. Had she given up? Had something happened? Then, at 12:17, she appeared. Thinner, older, worn by hardship. But her eyes were unchanged. They found him, and across the crowded station, the world disappeared. They ran, tears, laughter, embrace. "You came," she whispered. "I was afraid you wouldn't." He held her close. "Did you think peace would stop me?" After years of risk, 200 escapes and one final gamble, they were together again. Horace and Rosa were married in Munich 3 months after their reunion. The ceremony was simple, attended by American officers who respected Rosa's work as a translator and admired Horace's determination. There were no grand decorations, no lavish feast, just vows exchanged by 2 people who had already risked everything for love. For them, it was enough. After years of stolen nights and whispered promises, they could finally share their lives in the open. They settled in Munich, a city scarred by war but alive with rebuilding. Horace opened a small hair salon, using the skills he had learned before the war. Rosa continued her work as a translator, bridging gaps between Germans and occupying Allied forces. It wasn't easy. Mixed couples drew suspicion. Some British expatriates viewed Horace as a traitor who had chosen the enemy. Some Germans saw Rosa as a collaborator who had loved a prisoner. But Horace and Rosa were used to suspicion. They had lived under constant watch for years. Compared to sneaking through wire and dodging patrols, disapproving stares were nothing. Children followed. Their first daughter in 1952, whom they named Hope, Hoffnung in German, a symbol of what they had survived and built. 3 more children would follow in the next decade. Their home was filled with laughter, languages, and the noise of a family determined to thrive in the ruins of old hatred. Every child was proof that love could create life even in the ashes of war. Horace rarely spoke publicly about his escapes. When people asked about the war, he described conditions in the camp, friendships among prisoners, the grinding monotony. He never told them about cutting the wire, about racing across fields to Rosa's cottage, about 200 impossible nights. Perhaps it was because the story sounded unbelievable. Perhaps it was because it was theirs, private and sacred. But Rosa knew. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep, she sometimes asked him to tell the story again. "Were you afraid?" she asked once, 20 years after the war. Horace nodded. "Every time. Afraid of being caught. Afraid of putting you in danger. Afraid of never making it back." "Then why keep doing it?" Rosa pressed. Horace looked at her, the woman who had given him a family and a life, and said softly, "Because those hours with you were the only time I felt human." As the decades passed, Horace's story became family legend. His children knew, then his grandchildren. He taught them not just about courage, but about devotion, the kind that defies reason, the kind that insists love is worth every risk. He told them that survival alone isn't victory. Real victory is holding on to your humanity, even when the world tries to strip it away. And humanity for him was Rosa. The years were not without hardship. Post-war Germany was poor and politically divided. Suspicion lingered. Yet Horace and Rosa endured. They faced the whispers, the prejudice, the struggles of raising children in a fractured land. But compared to what they had already endured, these challenges were small. They had learned that love was not fragile. It was stubborn, resilient, unbreakable. Their love had already survived barbed wire, watchtowers, and death patrols. Ordinary troubles could not shake it. Horace lived to be 91. In 2012, he died peacefully in Munich, Rosa holding his hand, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Rosa survived him by 3 years, passing away in 2015. At their memorial service, their eldest grandson read from a letter Horace had written on their 50th wedding anniversary. "My dearest Rosa, you taught me that love is stronger than armies, more persistent than time, more enduring than empires. I escaped 200 times, but you were the one who set me free." The church was packed with family, friends, and former colleagues. Among them sat elderly men, survivors of Stalag XX-A. They had come to honor their old comrade, a man they once thought mad. One of them, Tommy Morrison, the same man who had built a dummy in Horace's bunk, spoke quietly, his voice trembling with age, but firm with conviction. "We thought he was reckless," Tommy admitted, "risking his life and ours for a girl none of us had met. But we were wrong. He wasn't escaping to get away. He was escaping to get to someone. And in doing that, he proved love is stronger than wire, stronger than guns, stronger than war itself." The congregation rose in applause, not for victory in war, but for victory in love, for a story that had begun with a boy in Leicester and a girl in a quarry and had ended with a family spanning generations. A story that showed how, even in the darkest times, the human heart can find light. Horace Greasley had escaped a Nazi prison camp 200 times, not for freedom, not for country, but for Rosa. And that is why, long after wars and empires have faded, his story still matters. Love had conquered all. And sometimes, that is the only victory that matters. I escaped from a Nazi prison camp 200 times, not to run away from something, but to run to someone. And in doing so, I discovered that love is the only prison you never want to escape. Horace Greasley.